John Strongman soaks in the sun. Pretty, shiny skin. Carotene orange. Greetings, I am Vandal Drummond, and I have been tripping where hate turns to love by rolling with Broadway Danny Wolf, where the equestrians dream up phantom monikers, by catching up with the ebony blade, jiving dear hot lolly, bartering with those who hold the sacred vapors, reuniting with Little Debbie at White Pegasus Ranch. Let your soul dive into that radioisotopic internation energy that swims through the web pages, where Colonel Sanders celebrates cerebra reprimere. We are all cerebra reprimere, never resisted it, always embrace it, like Krishna energy at LAX in 1977. The surfers, the swindlers, everybody, from the honest to the dishonest, to the sacred, to the seductive, to the secular, to the holy. All meet on the internet. Welcome to another edition of Slammin Stan. Like I said, this is Vandal Drummond, and I am joined by Fredo Esparza. How you doing, Alfredo?
Doing good. When did you come up with that one right now?
Just kind of thought it up in the last half hour. Just kind of did a little soul searching. I don't think I was 100%, but I think I hit on some pretty good points. And I think maybe if I listen to this over again, I will understand just what I said.
Have you been banned from Figure 4 Daily?
Have I been banned? I may have. I should go on the board. You know what? I should start a new thread and say, is Vandal Drummond banned? Because I think that would be the choice of the folks on the Figure 4 message boards.
Well, I figured just because it being Cinco de Mayo and being Lucha Week, that you would have actually got like one of the spots, like the final spot on the week.
Yeah, I did have spots in the past. I guess I am going out of style. That must be what it is. That must be the ticket.
You've been replaced by Todd Martin.
Yes, that's right. So yeah, I guess I'm out of mode. I guess that eagle has flown.
We were talking about how many Lucha shows there were this week. There was DR Lucha on, when was it, yesterday? I think the Cup Stand was on Tuesday.
I heard part of the Steve Sims interview. Not as much as I would have loved to catch up with everything. I have had virtually no time to catch up on anything. Once again, this is like a repeat of the last show, at least on my part, on my end of the spectrum. On my part, it's either I format or don't format the show. Yes, flip a coin, and, well, we should figure out which ones we have or have not formatted, and, we'll ask our listeners which they prefer.
Well, it doesn't really matter because they all end up coming out the same anyways. Sometimes I'll remember something to ask, and that's what it ends. Well, actually, you're the one that always remembers to ask the final question or whatever. But
That's true. Yeah, I've been spending the whole week recuperating from my weekend. I made a trip up to San Francisco to catch another round of roller derby where the San Francisco Bay Bombers met the Orlando Thunder, and was shown a little bit more San Francisco by Broadway Danny Wolf and his sidekick, Gary Sparrow. Danny Wolf took me to the racetrack in San Francisco. Can you believe I have never been to a horse race before?
That's the first time you've ever been to a horse race?
First time in my life.
Have you ever been to a dog race?
Never been to dog races.
Yeah, I've been to that.
I've seen dog races on The Simpsons in the very first episode.
Have you ever seen those cockfights, the real stuff?
Nah, I never wanted to see a cockfight.
I've seen those.
That's not my bag.
I grew up in a rough neighborhood.
Yeah, that's true. No, I could picture that. Well, you are in El Paso, right on the border, right?
Yeah, you take a couple of turns down, like it could be in like a normal neighborhood, and then you just take a couple of turns in a truck, and all of a sudden you find this little like ranch or something, and then they'll have like cockfights right there.
Oh dear.
Like old guys gambling and stuff. So how was the horse race?
The horse race, it was fascinating. There was something very surreal about it because Danny Wolf, plays the ponies. He's played the ponies for years. He loves the horse races. And we got out of the car, and I thought I would just follow his lead and just watch what he does. I wasn't planning on laying any money down.
Uh-oh.
But the very first horse's name that I saw, when he took out his little, what is it, you call it the spreadsheet or, you know, whatever the publication they have. See, I haven't learned the lingo at all.
Yeah.
I think I heard trifecta or, you know, win, place, and show. It's, you know, that's as deep as I got. Anyways, I look on his little schedule, and the first horse I see in the first race is a horse whose name is Uncle Wally. Now, I don't think I ever brought Uncle Wally up to you in the past, have I, Fredo?
I don't think so. Is that the guy who used to go to wrestling shows in the area?
Yes.
I think.
From, like, the first Hadco Plaza Lucha Libre show I went to in 1981, the only gringos in that place were myself, my friend Lloyd Lee, a father and son duo named Kevin and Ray Hackey, and a guy who we came to know as Uncle Wally. He must have been about 6'3", was a very doughy pear shape, had these creepy, droopy eyes. And he always drove up to the matches in this little dirty camper. The camper made him look twice as dirty. And when you saw him leering at all the young Mexican wrestlers, and everybody else in the audience for that matter, you just got the feeling that this was one of those guys who would just want to fondle anything that moved. Animal, vegetable, mineral. He just wanted to just pervert was written all over these people's faces. And, oh, wait, all over these people's faces? I'm sorry.
All over his face.
All over Uncle Wally's face. Yes. Anyways, he was like a mainstay in L.A. Lucha. And when I was actively wrestling on the Lucha scene in 1991, he came up to me and just said, you know, you're quite the character in there. You'd never think that you're quite the fellow inside the ring that you are outside the ring. And you know what? You've got a really sexy body. And I just politely thanked him and went on my way. And I have a feeling he said that to everybody he met. Man, woman, you know, geriatric child, horsey, doggy, kitty, I don't know. And then the conversation I remember the best from Uncle Wally was, I came early to the All Nation Center in Boyle Heights, which is probably where I had most of my Lucha matches. And there's Uncle Wally sitting in his camper, giving me that just crusty smile, and I'm walking by and saying, hey, how you doing? And Uncle Wally's like, no, I'm doing pretty good. You know, I went to this arena many, many years ago where you'd see people like Sandor Sabo and Leo Garibaldi wrestle. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's interesting. And then he looks at me and says, so what does your wife think about you wrestling? And I just kind of shrugged and said, oh, she's cool with it as long as I don't get hurt. And he just smiles and says, you know why she doesn't want you to get hurt? It's because she wants you to give it all to her. And I'm feeling a little queasy, and then he stares at me and says, so tell me, do you give it all to her? Oh, and I quickly changed the subject and asked him to tell me more about seeing Sandor Sabo and Leo Garibaldi wrestling in the past. And anyway, Uncle Wally passed away in 1994, and we actually gave him a 10-count salute. Needless to say, when we all gave him a 10-count salute, we were laughing hysterically by the end of the 10th bell ring. And that was the last we heard of Uncle Wally until I went to Golden Gate Park and saw a horse named Uncle Wally. And I planned to put no money down on any horse, but I said, okay, I have to put money down on Uncle Wally. And, of course, Danny Wolf encourages me to go through with this bet, which I do. And Uncle Wally started out in first place, but round and round she goes. When it came to the finish, Uncle Wally, appropriately, was in last place. I put $6 down, and Danny Wolf just thought it was hysterical that Uncle Wally finished last. And later when I went to the roller derby, I reunited with a fellow I wrestled at All Nation Center a number of times, Eric Anderson, the Ebony Blade, who was a hell of a hot babyface, was able to get a crowd at All Nation Center going in his first couple of matches. And when I mean his first couple of matches, this was like his debut. He got the art of the babyface down really quickly. But he was quite familiar with Uncle Wally, so I saw him at roller derby that night because, crossover, he is now a skater for the Orlando Thunder. And it was just, what a coincidence. This was the first time I saw Eric in over 12 years. 12 years, and I just happened to see him for the first time in a dozen years on the very same day I encounter a horse named Uncle Wally. And when I told him that, he just started busting up because he remembered the original Uncle Wally quite well. And I even got a few photos of the horse called Uncle Wally. And as I took pictures, I just thought, you know what? I could go up to this horse, stroke his face, kiss him on the nose, and I'd feel pretty good. I could not say the same for the original Uncle Wally. So, the original Uncle Wally, may you rest in peace. And for Uncle Wally the horse, may you thrive. I don't care if you come in first, second, last place. I just hope you are one happy horse. So that's my cute little anecdote for the week.
So you just got back like on Monday, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I had a really awesome weekend. I reunited with a cousin who I grew up with but have not seen in 25 years. She and I were like brother and sister, growing up, and so I went up her way. She and her husband live on a ranch, and hung with her and her family and drank Chardonnay till all hours of the night. And then on Monday, drove back, got home, went to sleep, got up for work the next day, and I've been trying to recover ever since. I had a thoroughly bitching weekend, I must say.
So you haven't watched any wrestling since then?
What's that?
You haven't watched any
I haven't watched any wrestling, and that's probably why I had a thoroughly bitchin' weekend. I had horse racing, I had roller derby, I had pancakes at the Lucky Penny, where we were on the quest to find Bo Taylor and Ace Womack. They were nowhere to be found. And I had an overdue reunion with my cousin Debbie. I had a great weekend. And none of it had to do anything with wrestling, with the exception of some of the skaters at the Lucky Penny. We all talked wrestling for a while since Eric Anderson is quite the wrestler and wrestling fan. And Ebony Blade, if by chance you're listening to the podcast, I just want to tell you it's been way, way too long since we've seen each other. It was great catching up with you again, and I always fill me in next time you're skating up at Kezar Pavilion, because that was so worth the trip.
Is he still wrestling, or is he done?
No, he's pretty much, I think he's wised up, as many do, and more or less retired, although he did say if Dan Farren and I ever decide to do a Cal International reunion show, which we may or may not do, but he said he's totally in because he was one of the mainstays of the short-lived Cal International promotion.
I like how you've made up your mind on that. You may or you may not do it.
That's the best thing a wrestler can do. It's like when people say retirement match. It's better to say, this will be the match where I may or may not retire.
Well, see, that's why it's easier to just say loser leaves town or whatever, Remember the
exactly. Exactly.
Now that's the only problem. Now you can't go anywhere. You're like, holy shit, where am I going to go?
I know it's a far cry from the regional days where you just could go to the next territory, and now it's either you're there.
Yeah, you spend a couple of months there, or maybe go somewhere else afterwards. Now it's like
totally.
You either have to go to TNA, work the Indies, or go to Mexico or Japan. And there's not a lot of other places, and even independents. I mean, you have to go into the East Coast, basically.
Well, it is the one loser leave town match that did happen. In fact, TNA lost a loser leave town match to Monday Night Spike Television. So it's going back to Thursday. What more need we say?
I don't even know why they made the switch in the first place. I mean, it wasn't going to help in any way. I mean, if you even just watching the first 20 minutes of the last Raw, it looked like so much better than. I mean,
I know.
Even if TNA had a really good show, it'd be hard for them to beat them just because of the difference in even the production.
Exactly. Yeah.
Being in the Impact Zone, being such a small building, it's like it's not going to look the same. You can't compete.
Exactly. It's just it's a whole different ball game, and it's just funny because the only thing that surprises me are that they threw in the towel so quickly. I guess it wasn't so much TNA that threw in the towel, but Spike threw in the towel on them, saying, enough of this crap.
I think they would have been fine if they would have just realized they were never going to beat. They were never going to beat WWE. Just go with what you're doing and, like, forget about it. But everything's built around WWE in the first place, so it's like, you know, like that thing, that battle for the ring or whatever they were doing with Abyss and Ric Flair. Like,
oh, man.
How many times can you talk about WWE on a TNA show? I think they talked more about WWE than WWE did.
Oh, you might as well just have a small, old-fashioned TV studio wrestling show with people who know nothing about working and, you know, just do the, you know, really boring 10-minute matches like they did in the old days.
Yeah.
I think you would actually get more viewers.
I think they probably would get a higher rating if they just went, like, if they went to black and white and, like, it was like...
That would actually be pretty cool. If you almost did a retro thing that was almost more of like a performance art project than a bona fide wrestling show. I bet you people...
And it wouldn't be so different because they have all the ex-WWE guys from like the 1980s there.
Exactly. Oh, I mean, if I could have my own little wrestling candy store and somebody gave me a TV show, seriously, I would do it in a TV studio. I'd have the ring be this garish bright blue color. I would have the graphics be so Stone Age, you know, like Big Time Wrestling would be the title of the show, and it would be,
like
you know,
big bold letters.
Yeah, big bold letters, and you know, the jobbers would be somebody wearing a mask with a bit of a gut, and you know, long baggy tights. The baby faces would be baby faces. They would, you know, all look like, you know, Rick Martel or something like that, and the heels would all be heels. They'd be dastardly. They'd be melodramatic. It would be sheer performance art.
Like those mask guys remember those mask guys in the old days that had the really tiny mask and the big old guts?
Yes.
I like these guys.
They're classic. Yeah, I'd be using guys with names like the Hangman, the Mauler, you know.
Yeah, you know, something like that. I mean, the I don't know. I mean, it just looked like as soon as they start talking about WWE, you know, they're not going to do anything.
Oh, exactly.
They're not going to compete with them. So it's like,
yeah.
You haven't been watching any Lucha, so we know we're not.
I have watched no Lucha. I have watched no WWE. I have watched no TNA, and I've been really enjoying myself lately. This is almost scary. It's like I'll start watching wrestling when there's something really unique.
Really good, and then
I want to watch CMLL, but man, that TV show is just a difficult TV show to watch.
Yeah, like on live, it's difficult. If you tape it, it's fine. That's not the best.
Yeah.
The show that Dr. Lucha talking about is the one that's in Mexico. It's not that one.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Not the LA TV one. The LA TV one's easy to watch. That's not the bad one. The one in Mexico is the one because they have like 7-minute commercial breaks, and then they'll come back.
That was actually really fascinating. I almost want to see that show just to say I saw it. See those. The
farting noise on it.
Yeah. Wasn't it a commercial for a fart toy or something, or a ringtone that was a fart or something like that?
It's like an app for your phone. An app.
Wow.
An app. So it all it does is fart. They repeat it like 4 or 5 times throughout the show. It's like, oh, great, come on.
Yeah. Well, the only thing that bugs me about the show we get here in Los Angeles is
all those cuts to the women, right?
Yeah, all the cut to the women. I mean, they're nice to look at, but there's so much of it, and they cut to so many interviews in between falls.
Yeah.
That kind of drives me a little loco.
You saw it before, didn't you, when it was on Fox Sports?
Yes, I did.
Remember how they used to show those really long, at least they got away from doing those really long interviews, remember? They would do like...
Those were comical. I mean, I almost wish I'd saved one of those.
But they were so long that it was like, okay, now I don't remember what happened.
And what was the classic one? Was it Loco Max?
Yeah, the one with the fanny pack.
Yeah, where he's going around wearing his fanny pack and just showing his kind of like his sad existence.
Yeah, he was showing everything he had, and then his son had one. He had little toys in there.
Yes, that was very strange.
Yeah, and then AAA is too much like TNA, man. It's like I can't get into AAA right now. You're back?
I'm back. I guess I left town.
No, you know what happened? Blog Talk Radio is having problems. They had you on. They had you off for like the last several minutes.
Oh no!
I'm guessing it's not working. I think it's not working. Nobody's been able to get in.
Oh, interesting.
Somebody just called in. So let me get this caller in. Caller, you're on now.
QNS, who's there?
Oh, see, he's on. He just got cut off. Oh, he got cut off.
This is fascinating. Maybe Blog Talk's getting tired of us.
You know, you got to bring that thing and we'll figure it out how to do it live.
What's that?
You got to bring that podcast thing over and I'll figure out how to do it on the...
I'll do that. That would actually be really cool. We'll have to kind of update this thing.
Yeah, because I think Blog Talk Radio, it's always like, this is like the third time this has happened, like the fourth time actually.
This is
like
true.
The fourth time. Did you see I played music this time?
Yeah, well, one cool thing is that when I was waiting for you to pick up after I got cut off, I got to hear the 5 years ahead of my time song, which...
Yeah, I could have kept talking, but I figured, there's...
Well, I must tell you that still is one of my greatest discoveries, which I found through you, was the third Bardo, 5 years ahead of my time. That is just the most awesome song. I don't know why I didn't discover that years ago. I wish I had. It's a bitchin' song.
You know, what would have been funnier if it would have cut me off and you would have stayed on. Then we would have been screwed right there. We would have been like, what? Then
I wouldn't have known. If I didn't hear your voice, I would just have assumed that I was cut off.
You would have kept talking. You would have been like, I guess Fredo must be a little tired. Let me just keep telling you about my trip to San Francisco. We're going to have Dave Meltzer on next week to discuss roller derby.
That's right. We're going to have Dave Meltzer cover my review of my trip to San Francisco. That would be pretty cool.
Did you send him anything about it?
I did not. Just, you know what? I honestly have been so busy since I got back that I have only been on Facebook, I think, 2 or 3 times during the whole week.
Uh-huh.
And for those who know me, I'm on Facebook frequently.
Oh, somebody else is calling. Let me get him on. Are you on?
Yes.
Caller?
Oh, I think I hear the Bixie Demon.
Oh, is it Bixie?
No, actually, you're hearing Carlos Esparza, one of the most interesting men in the world.
Oh, don't make fun of Dr. Lucha. Come on. That's a good intro. That was a good intro to the show, to that bio.
I still have not read the bio, so you know what? I'm going to have to let you guys... I'll have to let you guys talk about the bio a bit, because I have not read very much of it.
It's good, and Steve did a good job, but I told him this earlier, it really reads like Konnan Ghost wrote it.
Yeah, I think that I was going to write, I think the 4,000 words that were removed were Konnan's, was everything bad about Konnan. But I don't really know about that, so. It was good. I've only read half of it so far.
So, what you're saying, Bix, is it kind of more like an homage, or?
I don't know. It's just, that's the way it starts. It's like there is a commercial for Dos Equis Spear, which talks about the search for the most interesting man in the world. Carlos Esparza may be one of the most interesting men in the world. Blah, 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 blah.
Oh, Bix, you know Dr. Lucha's going to call in and argue with me.
Where is Dr. Lucha?
He's at some sort of business dinner or something.
Oh, damn it. I was hoping he'd do a run-in on this.
He's going to email us later today and tell us. He'll be upset at you guys. I said it was good. Big, stay quiet.
And I have to plead the fifth, so it's in your kid's court right now.
Well, I've only read the first part, which is pretty accurate about the Suarez stuff, you know, and the TJ and all that stuff. I mean, he didn't write. I don't think he wanted to write anything negative about Konnan. You could tell it's not going to be anything negative on there.
Well, he did say. I heard part of the podcast with Brian today, and it sounded like he did it in conjunction with Konnan. So when I think that's one of the things that are tricky. When you're doing it along with the subject, I think you do have to make compromises.
We got another caller. Let's see if he's read the Konnan bio. Caller, you're on. Oh,
hi. Is this Lucha Talk?
This is Lucha
Talk. It's actually roller derby talk.
Oh, hi. Yeah, this is Dan Farren. I'm sorry. I would have called earlier, guys, but I was sneaking Mil Mascaras through Arizona, and I had to get that done. Or the underground.
As long as they're not sneaking El Psicodelico through Arizona.
No, as part of the Underground Lucha Railroad that I was running all masked men through Arizona.
You know, that actually reminds me, in terms of, the Konnan bio, that he didn't include the story about, who was it? Juventud sneaking Konnan
I know,
into Arena Mexico in the trunk of his car.
I noticed that too. I was skimming through it, and I'm like, hey, it doesn't say anything about Juventud. It just switched. It went from TNA right into AAA, right?
I think, yeah. I mean, there wasn't much about Puerto Rico, really. Yeah,
and the Puerto Rico stuff was really good.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, from what I heard, I was listening to an interview with Mr. Sims, the good doctor, and he was saying that there was about 4,000 words that were cut out. So I don't know. I think what we need to do is we need to get the doctor to release the director's cut of the Konnan biography.
We're complete with an alternate ending.
Called the alternate ending, yeah, exactly, where he actually becomes Max Moon and stays that character.
That would be fascinating.
I'll bet you
exactly.
Dr. Lucha's version doesn't even have the Dos Equis intro. Probably some other thing on it.
I just wish it had the story in there for when Kurt. Do you remember we were in Tijuana at the matches right after Christmas time with Johnny Legend, who was there with his long beard and his long hair, and we were talking to Konnan. This little kid ran up and pointed to Johnny and said, Santa Claus, and Konnan started screaming at the kid and chasing him across the arena floor.
Yes, and using every cuss word I've ever heard in Spanish in my life.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing I thought was interesting that, since there's really very little about the post-WCW stuff until he gets into TNA, that I remember Konnan doing an interview where he basically admitted that while he was at the whole post-WCW period where he wasn't working much, I'm pretty sure he outright said that he got back involved in gang life.
No,
really?
No,
wow.
He never said that. He was studying for criminology or something. He was going to be a detective.
I can't remember which. I can't remember which interview it was, but he definitely said something like I got back into hustling for the first time in my life since I started wrestling.
He probably did that because he wanted to offset Vampiro being in the Guardian Angels. So he figured he would go automatically to the other side if Vampiro was on one side.
Oh, that would have been a great angle. Konnan and Vampiro staring each other down at Chapultepec Park.
And then trying to remember why they were.
I can ride that roller coaster more times than you, and I can do it backwards without a seatbelt, too.
We should rewrite.
Do you remember that? Do you remember that night at the sports arena when the first time that Konnan and Vampiro were on opposite sides in a tag match, and the electricity that ran through that building that night, because nobody really knew what was going to happen. Or who
you know what? I was not there that night, but you filled them in because I remember you telling me about that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it turned out to be just basically they worked together. But it was after all the animosity between them for so long, and I even forget who the other two guys were. But, you could feel it, whether it was among the Gringo fans or the Lucha hardcores or whatever. When that match came out and they were standing there waiting to go, you could just feel the electricity, the buzz underneath. Because these guys, in a way, I always consider like Vampiro and Konnan to be kind of like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart to some extent. There is, whenever they're together, something's going to happen.
Yes.
And it is, though, but unlike a lot of other, it's very much a wrestling relationship where there's a lot of ups and downs.
Definitely. And it's probably good they never got into, well, for Vampiro's sake, it's probably good they never actually got into it, because I do think Konnan would feed him his lunch.
Yeah, it's funny, too, because when reading the autobiography, well, wait, it was, but the biography, I forgot that, and again, this makes me feel old, how long Konnan's been in wrestling. I mean, I remember when, the first time I saw him was at a
San Bernardino Arena.
Well, before that, I saw him at a naval base in Long Beach with the last dying gasp of Wrestle Rock.
Oh my God! What was the fellow's name?
Muscle Rock, right?
Muscle Rock, that's what it was. Muscle Rock, yeah.
Eric, what's his face? I can't remember the guy's name who ran that.
I forgot the guy's name, and it was like this weird. It was just like these really. And no offense to these people, but a lot of them were like the dregs of wrestling at that point. They were people who had, jumped in the early 80s because they thought it was going to be a big thing, and this is like 1988, 89. And they, and I forgot who Konnan worked with that night, but I mean, there was guys on there. There was like Chief J. Strongbow Jr., and there was, there was like...
was Magic Schwartz one of them?
No, he wasn't on there, but there was a Samoan. I think it was the Destroying Samoan, whatever he was called at that point.
Southern California, in the late 80s, I would guess that if there's any wrestling show, there would be at least one Samoan on it.
Yeah, it's like any place else, but, with a Samoan, there's so many, I never blamed so many Samoans out here at that point. But, I mean, this is the first time I met him, and, again, he was very different from what, because the Lucha guys I've seen, no one looked like him at that point from the standpoint of the build. But after that, I did see him in San Bernardino at the Wind tapings. After that, I don't know if you mentioned that, but that was like around 1989.
Yeah, we have not mentioned that, and that's actually where the whole Lucha Mafia met each other. That's where
we all first met.
I met you, Mary Lou, Danny Wolf, Greg Regalado, the Hanna brothers.
That's coming up on 20 years ago, this year.
Isn't that weird?
Mm-hmm.
What is the time?
Actually, no, I think it's 21, actually, because...
It is 21, because those took place in 1989.
Yeah, so it's amazing how fast it goes, because by the time January rolled around, in 1990, they had already, at that point, had abolished the state licensing for wrestling, the Athletic Commission for wrestling, and that's when Johnny Legend first decided to do a show in January, because you no longer, at that point, to do a show, either Red Bastien, who was out here, had a license, and he would lend it to somebody like Alex Knight or whatever to do a show. But at that point, any show that was being done had to be done through a license, and then after that, that's when Hollywood Heavyweight Wrestling did their first couple shows in early 1990 with Konnan and a very young Rey Mysterio Jr. And then throughout the couple years that followed, and this is something that I joked with you about that was kind of left out of the biography, and for the purpose of time, not a lot really did happen, but basically Konnan just traveled between San Diego and Los Angeles and Orange County and paid his dues like anybody else. And, he worked. I remember that one afternoon when because the Lucha shows on Sundays used to start like 4 o'clock. And it was that bingo hall in Santa Ana, the very first place we saw Rey Mysterio Jr. And it was 4 o'clock on like a late summer afternoon, and there was literally 12 people in the entire bingo hall. To the point, if you remember, Rey Mysterio Jr. came out, and there was no one to take his jacket, so I walked over and took it. And that was the time that he was wrestling against Tim Talltree in that tag match, and they decided, because they had so much room, they were just going to wreck the joint. So they fought all over the building, chairs flying everywhere. It was a great show.
And that was before it was really hep to go, tearing the arena apart. That was before the
this was back in the early days, because that whole thing, because you remember the first time we went out to Cal State and saw the FMW show, and they brawled now in that main event, which they do every place now, but at that time they brawled into the stands, which you just didn't do, and that was the most amazing thing we had ever seen. But
when you don't see it every week, it's still exciting. If you brawl in the stands every week, it's like,
Yeah, but you forget sometimes that, that Konnan, it's an excellent match. It still holds up. I just watched it recently again. It holds up after all these years. But, no, I mean, if you forget that, my God, Konnan's been in the business over 20 years now at that point. And it's just amazing how fast time flies. And he's covered a lot of ground when you think about all the different groups and he went from, being the big muscular mask guy to working without the mask, and then and then there was that thing in TNA when he was hurting, and his big move at that point, all he could really do was take off his shoe and throw it at somebody. I mean, he was in such bad shape, and the fact that he's even walking around or even doing any kind of wrestling now is amazing with what he's gone through.
And one of the interesting things where he wound up today, I actually do really think it's cool that he has some hand in creative at this point in his career, because I remember even when he was a rookie, he was always coming up with booking ideas. Whenever there was some new indie promotion in town and he could, get his hands on the book and stuff, he'd come up with some pretty cool ideas, like angles for people like Tim Talltree and Louis Spicolli.
He did. He was one of those guys that worked out of a notebook all the time, and sometimes he would give me a call to give me results or something to pass on to the newsletter, or at one point he was kind of using me as a conduit to Steve Beverly to get information to Matt Watch, which was very popular at that time, newsletter. And the guy really had become a student. For a guy that didn't have a lot of background growing up in Lucha, he really studied and caught on pretty quickly. And I think he was also very wise, knowing that it is a good captain that is the master of his own ship, and he knew where he wanted to be going, and he always, from the very beginning, he had an idea of where he wanted to go, and he stayed that course pretty steadily throughout his entire career. At one point he wanted to be in the WWF, and he got there, and then found it wasn't for him. And then I remember he told the story, and I've seen it elsewhere, where he mentioned to me that he knew that this tenure was not going to be long when he got in the ring and did some sort of move, and Lex Luger made fun of it. And so, like, ooh, what kind of
writing on the wall right away.
I remember reading that story in his Torch Talk, that it was like that was when he was in WCW, actually, I think, that it was like,
it might have been. I mean, all that stuff is such a blur at that time, because
I remember the story that he's talking to Brian Pillman, and Brian Pillman's like, "Oh, I love Super Astro. Does he? You know how he does this one spot?" And Connan's like, "Oh, I don't really know." And then Luger goes over to Linda Rufa and does a mocking gay voice and says, "Well, I guess I'm going to have to learn some new moves."
Yeah, but it's also because Carlos always basically did everything. Ooh, I'm sorry, I sounded like such a smart mark there. Carlos always. Are
you a fan of Mark Calloway?
Or I'll start calling them by the wrong first name, the real first name. But what was always amazing about Konnan is he would call me up sometimes, and one time he called me up to give me some results, and I didn't recognize his voice at first.
You thought it was a prank call? I remember that.
I thought it was a prank call, so I started acting like an asshole to him. Then I suddenly realized, oh my God, this is actually Konnan, and I'm like treating him like a jerk.
Didn't he say something like, what's with the attitude, Farren?
Yeah, something. And I quickly apologized, and and I think I even,
I remember that.
I think I even took, if I could have driven him someplace and bought him a woman at that point, I would have done it, just to make up. But he was always very, very nice to me, and I know he was to you too. And whenever we worked with him, he always would sit there and say, I have this idea, and I think, what do you think of this? Will this idea work? Would that work? And plus, also, he was such a big brother to Rey Mysterio Jr. when they were starting out. Because Rey was 13, 14, 15 at that point.
I think when we first saw him, it was at the bingo hall in Santa Ana, and he was 14 years old.
Yeah, that was the night
when he was ditching school to wrestle.
That's right, and he was working in openers, and usually it was in a tag match, and his opponent was usually Psychoses. Back when he was without the mask, and he was his brother El Salvaje, or was he El Salvaje?
He was El Salvaje.
Yes,
his brother
exactly.
was Caballero dos Mil.
That's right, and and there was that great night, one night where he climbed to the top rope, and Psychos did a leap off the top rope, and he didn't take into consideration where the roof was, and he actually put his head through the roof on the way, the tile on the roof on the way down.
The other fellow he wrestled a lot on those indie shows was there was a guy, Tijuana boy named Astucia.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved on the Hollywood heavyweight wrestling show that you and Eric Hayden and Johnny Legend promoted. You gave him the name Telstar in tribute to the Challengers' classic surf instrumental.
Yes, exactly. Because Johnny had this big thing, and I didn't really particularly care for it at that time because I was still, trying to, and still to this day, kind of try to be a traditionalist, and I didn't think we needed to rename the guys to make them, to make them more accessible. But Johnny wanted to do that because, again, the whole idea of those shows were that we would do a wrestling show and then there would be a concert afterwards. So and this again is the early version of Lucha Vavoom, and he was on the right track that night, but it was just that it was kind of, you would give these guys these names and they'd be introduced and they would have no idea what you were talking about. It's like, who's that? Am I Telstar or you Telstar? Who is,
That's right. Who was it? Superboy and Psychosis were billed as the Reanimators.
Yes, the Reanimators. God, because Johnny had a bit part in the Bride of the Reanimator at that point. So Johnny's figured, well, if I play off of that, maybe somebody, maybe if I do that, maybe someone connected with the show will come down in the movie, and it'll be I'll get publicity for it.
I would love to be inside Johnny Legend's mind for just one day, just to see what it's like to see the reasoning. No, just for one day, not anything past that, not just for one day.
I think, and I will say, it's really easy to sit here and start plugging in holes, but Dr. Lucha did a great job with that biography. It's pretty amazing.
I'm going to have to get a big meal and be by myself and sit down and because it looks like a lengthy read, but I want to really drink it in when I read it.
By the way, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just said what I actually wound up doing was I actually used one of those programs where you could, you could basically download so you could read it offline because I knew it was going to be a long time and it was easier just to be able to read it offline or take it with me on an iPhone or whatever than it was to try to read it online because it's so blame long. I mean, it's close to magazine size or book size even, really.
I'm a dinosaur. I'm such a dinosaur that I still get the hard copy in the mail. I still like taking it somewhere with me to read over coffee or something like that.
You're going to get a book next.
Well,
I already mentioned, I think I mentioned twice that I went up north this past weekend and reunited with a cousin I have not seen in many years. The part I neglected to say is her youngest son, is a very nice guy, is about to go into the Army. I was tempted to break both his legs so he couldn't. But the other thing he wants to do, I mean, this is how fast this kid is living. This is how extreme and how worried I am. The other thing he wants to do when he's out of the Army is he wants to become a professional wrestler.
Tell him to stay in the Army.
Yeah, exactly. I'd say he has a better chance of surviving Iraq than being a wrestler in this day and age.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, I was tempted to break both his legs so he couldn't do either, but I actually did leave him with the most recent copy of the Observer. I'm thinking about buying him a subscription just so he sees what the business is like before he gets in it. Because 20 years ago, I would have been excited to hear that, somebody in my family also wanted to be a wrestler. Now I'm terrified.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I mean, it's funny. I talk about the Army. I have a friend who's a stand-up comic, and she's about to go over this weekend to Iraq for her first tour to do stand-up for the troops. And she said to me, I'm a little bit worried. And I said, oh, come on. You're not going to get hurt over there. You're going to come back here and get shot in L.A. like the rest of us. Don't worry about it. It won't happen there. I think
or run over by somebody texting while driving.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's always a good idea. I like the idea of people reading the Observer. It's always so amazing. I talk to so many guys who want to be wrestlers. They read the Observer, they become a wrestler, and then they stop reading it. And that doesn't quite make a lot of sense to me because...
Are they still in wrestling, though?
Some of them are, some of them aren't. I mean,
if you quit wrestling, I could understand stop.
Yeah, I mean, if you quit, exactly. If you wanted to let go of it or what, it depends. But, I think it depends again on what kind, there are certain people who, like us, who basically, when it comes to wrestling, we devour it. It's like a buffet. We want to find everything we can about it. We chew it all up. And there's other people who either they like to do it and they don't need to know everything else, or they just want to have it. It's kind of like if you look on message boards sometimes, and it sometimes frustrates me as a dinosaur to see people like they want to skim over a biography of Gene Kiniski to get to the news that week to see who wound up where on the draft or whatever. And if
it pisses us off a little bit, could you imagine how Jim Cornette feels if he were to see that message thread?
He basically is threatened to kill 5 different people at this point. So, and I know that Mr. Meltzer feels the same way too. One time, because there was they put up a poll about who was the greatest brothers tag team of all time, and it had all these guys on there. It had the Tollus brothers and the Sharp brothers and all these guys, and the leader at that point was the Steiner brothers.
Oh dear!
And I wrote an email to Dave, and I said, "Oh, Dave, the Steiner brothers?" And I got a 2-word reply. I know.
Oh dear!
That's what he gets.
But I think
the other glaring difference about younger when we see younger people getting into wrestling today, I think when you and I first knew each other, when people would try to get into the business, they would, give it a really good try, and if it wasn't working out as a career, they'd still kind of hang on to it and stick with it somewhat, where it seems like you hear about a lot more guys who, make a pretty decent splash and get burnt out on it at an early age, which in one sense is kind of sad that the business turns so many people off, but at the same time, it's good to see some people moving on with their lives when they realize it's not all it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has a lot, and I think basically now you were obviously a worker, so I mean, you approached it, and you've had, and we talked about it, you've had those highs and lows where you get out and you do just a shitload of independent shows, and then you go through long, portions where you don't do any shows at all, and then maybe you come out once in a while, and it's kind of like with the MPW show coming up. I mean, all of a sudden, there's that moment where you say, you know what, I think I'd like to go back to the circus. I think I'd like to go back.
I wouldn't do it any other way than I did it, to be honest with you. I mean, I'll be honest, early in the 80s when I first started doing it, I was hoping I would make it a career, but I realized pretty early on, I don't think I can hang with this. One, I am very much a domestic house cat. I don't think I could. I think the charm of being on the road would wear off pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Two, it's really good to be a pretty legitimate tough guy when you're a wrestler. That I was not. But
plus, also, you were doing jobs for Jack Armstrong back then. And,
that was actually the high point, man. Just wrestling Jack Armstrong.
And being saved by Alex Knight.
Knight, okay, that was a low point. The high point was wrestling Jack Armstrong. The low point was being saved by Alex Knight at the end of the match.
I have to ask, though, was the moment where you decided not to make it a career at some point during the few days you were in Vancouver?
Yes, very good. When I was working for Al Timko.
For, what was that, 5 days?
5 days. I had 2 matches, and he came up to me, and I'll never forget, there he was with, his multicolored flower tights on, and looking like Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and telling me I was too little. So on one hand, you could say sour grapes, I was too little, I couldn't make it. But, well, there were 2 things. Ed Moretti was there, very nice, one of the nicest people in the biz. If there were more people like Ed Moretti in the biz, I would have tried a little harder to make it. But most of the people were like Al Timko. Now, Timko did not look like a wrestler and was pushing himself on top. Plus, I talked to some of the other wrestlers, just everyday conversations, and I'm saying, am I really going to hang with these guys? There was one fellow who was a carny and thought he could con you with every other sentence he threw at you and did very bad at it. There's one fellow who was an ex-basketball player in the area who actually was a bit of a celebrity for that, who was actually a very, very nice guy, but, not a Rhodes Scholar, let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. Was trying to tell me the history of the boombox. Told it to me all incorrectly, and it was fascinating, but in a cringe factor way. And then that's when I realized, you know what? I'm going to have to shoot a shitload of steroids to even be employable in that day and age. And I remember
were you sad or disappointed by that, or was it just basically, well, this is not going to be quite what I thought it was?
At the time I was sad because it was something I wanted to do. Didn't quite have my fill, but I realized, in fact, I remember a few weeks later I talked to Jack Armstrong and just asked him where I could hook up with steroids and that kind of thing. And after a while, he was just kind of saying to me, you know what, you look a lot better without steroids. And he said, with steroids, to be honest, in the United States, you will probably still be low on the undercard and maybe be employable. Armstrong was a really down-to-earth guy, and he said you could probably get a lot more interesting work, than just being an undercard wrestler, somewhere in this world.
Now, at some point, like for example, when you worked that opening match on the AAA show, and you were at the sports arena, and you wound up being on the Lucha show in Mexico, was there any little twinge at that point of like, well, maybe what is something
Well, I'll tell you what. That was in 1993, and the reason after the whole Vancouver thing and working a couple of indies in the rest of 1984, I pretty much was not hands-on in wrestling for another 6-7 years. Mm-hmm. Then when I started working the Lucha Indies in Southern California in 91, it was perfect because I thought, okay, I can kind of, get my fill. I can kind of still get in on it, not have it be a career. But the one thing that was frustrating after coming back from Al Timko's territory was that, well, this isn't going to work out, and I'll probably always wonder if I could have, been any good at it. And the cool thing about doing the indies in the early 90s was, I was able to get involved, almost on a weekend warrior type of basis. And in 1993, when I was on that AAA show, I was booking the undercard, the local talent, and at the same time I was booking talent for Michinoku Pro when they were bringing in the L.A. boys like Superboy and Crazy Boy and Piloto Suicida. Mm-hmm. And I began thinking, whoa, maybe there's some way I can make some sort of a career, via the booking,
right?
Even wrestling undercards, whatever. But between the promoters and the wrestlers, they all kind of drove me crazy.
Yeah.
Well, you were not necessarily dealing with the most honorable businessman in the world, as Ray thought.
No, exactly. It's so true. Oh my God.
Well,
I tell you, I loved the best lesson I got from that is I found out who really were my friends, because when I was able to book people for Japan and book people for the undercard for AAA. Everybody wanted to be my friend. Everybody was my buddy. And then when I lost those gigs, I didn't just say, okay, I don't want to do it anymore. Michinoku didn't need me anymore because they were content on just using Superboy and Piloto Suicida, and they could just book them, directly. Right. And some of the LA boys and Pena and Scholar didn't get along well, and so that was that for me. But I found out there were a few who were still just as much my friends as they were, namely Superboy and Capitan Oro and Piloto Suicida were the ones who stayed my friends after I lost, any guise of power. And so that was a pretty wonderful lesson. But I also remember just the things people had fights about, and just the bickering was over the most childish things. And, you probably remember, Dan, you probably remember a couple of my phone calls where I think I practically did a Jim Cornette screaming about how crazy everybody was.
Yeah.
And that was when I realized, you know what, I don't want to do this as a career. I want to have my hands on it. And in that sense, I'm really lucky. I was able to get involved with it, but it was never work to me. I could never say I was one of the boys. I was always an indie geek. Yeah. And I now use the term indie geek. I think people should fly that flag proudly. There's nothing wrong with being an indie geek, a ham and egger.
Well, it was funny for me because my path was a little different. I never figured. I started following wrestling in 1970, and I never figured that I would ever be involved in any way, shape, or form in the ring. As I'd said in the show before, the main thing that kept me from ever being a professional wrestler was a complete lack of talent whatsoever. And I didn't, and I followed wrestling, and I loved it, and I enjoyed it, and I came along at a great time because it was like 1970, so San Martino, Morales, and Dory Funk Jr., and Terry Funk, Carly, all those guys were there, and it was a fascinating time. And then coming out to L.A., there was a chance to see so many of guys work. And then when I got the chance through Slammers to start refereeing, it was fun to do. And then when I got a chance to book a little bit, that was even more fun to do. Because I'm not one of those people that has to be out in the front and has to be seen by everybody. I'm just as happy putting a show together and staying in the back and letting it unfold and be what it is than I am to be out there and to take in all the accolades or all the blame, depending on how it goes. But one of the things that worked, I think, was really funny for me is that I get a big kick now how people, they refer, to me as like this old-timer who, from the LA area and all this stuff, because I was a little bit older than the guys. I was in my mid-30s when I started reffing. And, so I got kind of a reputation to the point where nowadays, because I'm just so freaking old and I've been around for a long time, they figure I have to know something, which is always funny.
Well, another thing is, I know you joke about the complete lack of talent, but the truth is you were much better equipped to have a presence in wrestling than I was. I mean, I think I was okay as a worker. Put a microphone in front of me and I'm a disaster. But you were very good at being able to pitch a match, to be able to to get over a feud. You were very good in the role as a referee, and I've seen you book a lot of shows that before you were booking, the shows were just these big disaster areas, and you really understood how to organize a show and book it from top to bottom, not have the matches go too long, not have the undercard outshined the main event. You were actually very good at what you did.
Oh, thank you. You've never been so nice to me before. I don't understand it.
Well, you're my friend. What fun is being nice to you?
I know. But, it was funny because at the end of the 90s, when I started winding down, because at that point I was starting to hurt a little bit from just, people forget that as a ref you take all kinds of bumps anyway, too. And I got sciatica and all kinds of problems now, and I know it comes from some of that. But when I got a chance to do, it was really funny. The only time I never really cared about I never sent a resume in or ever wanted to do, be anything, big or whatever there. But when I did the NBC special, The Secrets of Pro Wrestling Exposed, there was a moment there where I thought, you know what? If this show is as big as the Magic show, because the same guys had done the same show, and this is like, maybe, just maybe, I could get bookings as the mask referee. I could play off of this, and maybe Vince would be smart and say, you know what would be great? This show got this, this show was out there and got this great reaction. I'm going to bring the guy in who played the referee and like have him do a run-in, and everybody, it'll be all this. And that lasted for about 15 minutes, to the point, though, I did go out just in case and bought a Freddy mask and put black tape on it so I could have a copy of the mask in case I needed to wear it. But then, of course, the show came out. It aired twice, and I think if they had them any longer, test patterns scored higher than those two shows did. So it is funny how they lived.
Hire you over this?
I'm sorry, what?
Were you high when you thought Vince would hire you based on?
For about 5 minutes, yeah. I've been sipping some airplane glue, and I thought,
almost everybody, no matter how low they were in the tiniest indie promotion, has that delusional moment where they think something that will never actually come to. Nobody will admit it. Everybody thought it.
And if you're lucky, it only lasts about 5 minutes, and you don't do any damage to yourself by repeating it to anyone else until now. But I'm more than willing to offer myself up for humiliation for this. But there was that moment I thought, what if? And then I started laughing hysterically because, like I said again, nobody watched this show. I mean, it's funny, though, on occasion I do have guys walk up to me and hand me a copy of the videotape and ask me to sign it. And
there was one person who watched it. Remember, there was somebody who put out a bounty on you and anybody else involved?
Oh, God, there was a guy on the Internet who was so furious that I exposed the business. And actually, everybody basically knew it was me from Body Shape on down. Plus, also, the stupid thing was they decided to digitize the voices. But they didn't do that when I was in the ring. So I was saying, hey, get out, let the man go. And you could hear my voice, But and I had two guys who were local workers here who really and truly, they did snub me after that. And my reaction to that was I started laughing, just hysterically laughing, because neither one were in the business any more than 2 or 3 months after that. And the only person who I was concerned about was Jeff Walton, because I had always liked Jeff Walton, and I didn't want Jeff to think I was doing anything. And I remember Jeff Walton said to me, you exposed the business, didn't you, like that? And he looked at me very seriously, and I said, Jeff, it was the biggest payday I ever had. And he says, that's okay, I worked for Mike LaBelle. So,
God bless Harley Race exposed the business on that.
Harley Race? Oh, that was still my favorite thing. There was a kid standing in the ring with me, and they had done a spot, and Harley came lumbering down the aisle and said, you know what, they should do this and do that. And it was something they used to do in the old days. And the kid, whispered to me, he goes, they don't do it that way anymore. And I said, you want to tell Harley Race they don't do that anymore? I said, if Harley Race tells me to jump off the top of the Olympic Auditorium, I'm going to jump off the top of the Olympic Auditorium, because if I don't, he's going to throw me off. But I did. I had lunch with that. It was funny because when we would go to lunch, the groups would break off. The young guys would go over and want to sit with the pit bulls and whatever, and talk about all the extreme stuff. And I always would go over.
I wanted to do when you first told me that. I was laughing the same way Dave just did, because I thought, damn, Harley Race, but no, I think I'll go hang with the pit bulls.
Yeah, there's Harley Race and Bill Ash and all these guys, and I'm thinking, what am I? I'm not stupid. I'm going to go sit with them. And I remember Harley, and even then, Harley was scary. He really did intimidate me, sitting there, and he would barely smile. And he was talking like this, and was really serious. And every once in a while, he would fade off and have a memory hit him, and he would just say it out of nowhere. He would say, I had a really nice Cadillac one time, and I parked it in St. Louis, and I wrestled Rufus R. Jones to an hour draw. When I came out, people had cut all 4 tires and thrown rocks at my new car. So I always remember that. But that show, I tell you, we did it over 4 or 5 days. It was a lot of fun. It is still kind of funny that, like over 10 years later, that people still remember that. And you can go on YouTube and pull the damn thing up and see it.
Wasn't our friend Danny Wolf the masked timekeeper?
Oh, God, they made Danny Wolf the masked timekeeper, and he wore this Zorro mask, and I called him Darkwing Duck, because that's what he looked like.
I remember that. He had, like, this, like, fake Grand Wizard sort of thing on his head, too.
Yeah, I mean, it was hysterical.
Did I actually just hear Fredo's voice for the first time in, like, 35 minutes?
Probably have.
Is Fredo there?
But Fredo's made 4 dubs in the last half hour, so.
I gave up a long time ago.
There he is. He's still with us.
I gotta ask Danny the immortal question. Where did the stunt granny thing come from?
Oh, God. Oh, my God. That was, when I first went in, Danny Wolf was the one that brought me in. And I sat down and talked to the producer and the woman who was, like, the liaison. And they said, tell me stories about reffing and whatever. And I told them stories I told them how, any kind of tricks you use. And you tell them some of the stuff you do. And I told them how, one time when I worked with wrestlers who were smaller than I am, if they're coming at me, I'll crouch down. Simple stuff, And I told them different stories about wrestlers, and they got all excited. They said, okay, we want you to do the show. And then they started telling me all the names of the guys that were supposed to do the show. And then one by one they started dropping out because I guess they got cold feet or they weren't being paid enough. I mean, One Man Gang was supposed to do it at one point, and Butch Reed was supposed to do it. But they asked for all these stories, and I don't know where the stunt granny thing came from. But all I know is I'm sitting there watching this, and I turned to the woman who was the producer, and I said, where did that come from? Because I said, I know that oftentimes they do use plants for different things, but I don't ever remember a stunt granny story at all. And I think it came from one of the guys that worked for Bill Ash, who I think he was the guy who was like the Mad Max character on there. I forgot his name. And I think that they had done something one time, and they took that then as gospel, But it was so funny how they went through and decided what to put in and what not to put in, and then the guys were freaking out because they thought they were going to, and at one point they really did think that if this show went, this was so funny, that if this show went, they were going to go on tour with us.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, so what we were going to do is we were going to expose the business as being fake and then go out on the road and put on a fake wrestling show.
Exposure 94.
Exactly,
oh
Exposure
my God.
And it was hysterical.
You could have called it Exposing the Business, and then J.R. Benson would have sued.
Yeah, exactly. But I remember that show aired. It was so funny. It started airing on the East Coast at 4 o'clock, and I started getting all these phone calls saying, that's you. And I said, yeah, of course it's me. What do you think it is?
And everybody I knew who knew about the local indie scene, the first thing they said was, that's Dan Farren, and that's Danny Wolf.
Well, it was kind of hard not to know it wasn't Danny Wolf.
Oh, that trademark smile of Danny's. He can't smile even when he's supposed to frown.
That's why he always gets in trouble when he does roller derby, because Danny has this nervous reaction that makes him laugh whenever he's nervous or if somebody's threatening him. So, like, somebody will threaten him, and he'll start laughing, and they'll start whacking on him. They'll start punching him and everything.
Well, or when he's doing the angle with me as Lucky Pierre, who has a crush on Broadway Danny Wolf, I chase him around the ring, and when I catch him and start humping him in the ass, he has a big grin on his face, like he's just loving it.
Well, that could be something different altogether. I have no idea.
Wait a second, that was an angle?
Oh, my God. I molested Danny Wolf, but I don't even realize it.
Now, where did the pen thing come from?
The pen? Oh, well, it was not unusual to do different things, and I think they may have gotten that from me because I had worked some Herb Abrams shows as the timekeeper. And it was so funny about the Herb Abrams shows is that they would say, like I would be on the headphones, and Bill Anderson would say, the next match is going to be 6 minutes, Dan. And okay, and then at 4 minutes, Larry Zbyszko would decide to go home. So they never even made it to whatever length or whatever. But on a couple of occasions, what they said to do was they gave me a pen and they said, stick the pen in your mouth whenever it gets to be the time, and then the referee will look over and see that. He'll keep checking with you, and then when he sees that, then he'll know it's tell the boys it's time to go home. And a couple times, people would have thought I had an oral fixation.
I was going to say, when you stuck the pen in your mouth, did you ever think of me?
Yeah, because it was small and thin. But I would sit there and I was going like, this is looking kind of stupid now, and I think that's where it came from. But it was not unusual in the old days. But the thing was, when they did it so broad and so big.
Right.
I said to Danny, I said, why don't we just change it? And what you can do is, when the timekeeper comes, you can just stand up and go, time to go home. Like that.
Well, do you remember in the dying days of Mike LaBelle, the way they signaled wrestlers to go home? Art Williams would be at the side of the ring, and when 5 minutes passed, he would slam his hands on the mat melodramatically and then hold up his 5 fingers. And he'd start slamming his hands on the mat again when it was time to go home. It's like LaBelle did everything he could to expose the business without getting in the ring and saying, okay, guys, this is all fake. He did everything. How about the loser leave town matches where the loser of the match would wrestle a different wrestler in a loser leave town match every night of the week, and they would advertise every match on television. Yeah. Professor Ito will wrestle Tom Jones, loser leave town Sunday night. Then he'll wrestle Hector Guerrero Monday night, loser leave town. Then Chavo Guerrero, loser leave town.
The funny thing about it was that was not that unusual. They did that in Memphis all through up even into the 80s and early 90s. But they didn't advertise it
around the loop.
Yeah, they didn't advertise it. That was the whole thing. And I know sometimes that would always be funny, but I know that the way they were supposed to do it was loser leave town match on Tuesday night and just not say who it was. But yet they would somehow do it anyway. Yeah, exactly. Or I guess I'm going. My only guess would be, and I bet you if you ask Jeff Walton this, that they would claim this was the psychology behind it. It was a loser leave town match for that city.
Well.
So if think about it, it's kind of like what they do with Mystico, where he's a Rudo in one town and he's technical in the other. Tom Pritchard could lose in San Bernardino and can't wrestle there anymore, but he could win in Bakersfield and wrestle there.
The other thing they did regularly was they would have a 2 out of 3 fall match where the first fall is for the title, the second fall is for the belt, the third fall is the loser leave town. And I'm not joking, they really did that.
I know they did. I remember talking to Pat Patterson at Cauliflower Alley one time, and I said, you came down here from a regular basis, what was the stupidest match they ever stuck you in? And he goes, I did a thing with Piper one night where the first fall was my U.S. title, and the second fall was the America's title, and he says, I forgot what the third fall was even. It was some stupid
I remember the angle. It was loser leave town. I remember even being 15 years old and just saying, oh, my God, they're going total retard on us.
Yeah. Exactly.
They were starting to make some of those Bill Apter articles look educational, Yeah. I remember the Bill Apter article about Matilda, the magic computer that was going to save mankind, but Sir Oliver Humperdinck got his hands on it and tried to destroy the Briscoe brothers with it.
That's right.
Sadly, the computer had to be destroyed because it did something so evil. I'm not joking. There really was a story.
Or I remember they would do that.
So it was like the Hal of wrestling.
What's happening things in the beginning of the Pro Wrestling magazine.
Yeah, here's what's happening, baby.
It would be like Abdul the Butcher and Dominic DeNucci ran into each other at a cocktail party and had to be separated the other night. Yeah, I want to see Abdul the Butcher in a tuxedo. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, and Dr. Bill Miller is wrestling in Georgia.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, wow.
And Georgia is very upset. No, but those magazines. It's amazing about those magazines because also it was so funny because the you think about everything now. after, if someone wins the title like on one of the TV tapings, by the time the ref's hand hits the mat for the count of 3, it's already on a board someplace, or it's already been phoned to somebody or sent to somebody. But back, when I first started following wrestling into the early mid-'70s, I remember that when Jack Briscoe won the title from Harley Race, we found, through the magazines, I found out like 4 months after it happened.
Yeah, that was generally big news. Even title changes often traveled very slowly, the news of them. We wouldn't find out about them.
Well, that's because you were in a non-NWA territory, though.
Yeah, exactly. Though, even there, they held that information back until it was to their own, like, for example, I remember that when Terry Funk won the title from Race in Canada, the week before...
You mean when Race won the title from...
yeah, exactly, from Funk. Yeah, they did this whole thing, because Funk had been out here a couple times, fighting with Chavo Guerrero prior to that. And I remember going, this is interesting, because they announced that Chavo was supposed to wrestle Terry Funk for the title this week in Canada, but Piper had done something so horrible that Chavo wanted to fight him at the Olympic on Friday night. And then the next week they announced, that
that's one thing. LA would actually announce world title changes in quick time, and they would have also made frequent references to Sam Mushnick or Eddie Graham, which was always interesting.
Because they always have, even right there on the set where they had the big NWA logo behind them, always had either Sam Mushnick's or Jack Atkinson's or Eddie Graham's name underneath as the president. So, there's no way you could forget who the president of the NWA was at that time.
See, if I was running that thing, Dr. Jerry Graham would have been the president year-round, whether he wasn't in town or not.
Never mind, talking about Chavo and Terry Funk, is it true that there was a NWA title match between them where Chavo won and then Funk demanded that they weigh Chavo because he must have lost enough weight that he was no longer a heavyweight?
That sounds like an LA thing. I don't know if that happened.
Oh, you know what? It almost had to. I don't recall it either, but I'm sure, if you ask Steve Yowie or somebody, I'm almost positive it had to happen. It sounds like an LA.
They did the angle with the junior heavyweight title. They would do that angle with the junior heavyweight title where I think the babyface would win and then drink a lot of water after the match and they weigh him and, he's overweight, so.
They did stuff like that with Ken Mantell when Mantell was the junior heavyweight champion.
With Pork Chop was the challenger.
And Pork Chop, what they do is he would wrestle him in San Bernardino and they would either do like the title was up the first half hour of the 45-minute time limit, and of course,
the Crockett thing with the TV title, right?
Yeah, the 40-minute mark, or they used to do that, and then I think they did the Wade thing with him. Some of those angles are so simple and they work so well, especially when you have, I was thinking about that on Monday night watching the Beat the Clock thing. Now it doesn't mean anything, but back in the old days when things would happen, whatever, that Beat the Clock thing was always cool because Lord Patrick Roach, who was an actor and a wrestler from England who was fairly big out here at one point, and he was a tall guy. He was probably the biggest guy in the area. They brought Andre in to eventually squash him, but he did this whole thing where he, if you could pin him in the first 15 minutes, you would win, $1,000 or whatever. And then, of course, what happened is, at first he would always wind up cheating and winning somehow. But the other thing was that he would sometimes then, when he was on his way out, he started dropping the matches at like the 20-minute mark and things like that. Do you remember Lord Patrick Roach at all, Kurt?
I remember Lord Patrick Roach very well. I thought he got over pretty well.
Yeah, he got over very well.
Sorry?
Lord Patrick Roach.
Yeah, 1974.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know he worked in the U.S.
Yes, and he was one of those...
he was one of those guys like also King Kirk. Mal Kirk worked out here for a while even.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, he was King Kirk, and he worked out here. He only worked in openers. I mean, that was the whole weird thing is I guess all these guys at one point were on their way to Japan for whatever reason.
We also
and they would stop off.
We also had David Morgan for a while, Stephen Wright. We had several of the classic British workers.
And, of course, Lord Patrick Roach, who has since passed away, was an actor also, and his biggest claim to fame was he was the guy, the big bald-headed giant that Harrison Ford was fighting in the Raiders of the Lost Ark that wound up walking into the plane propeller.
Yeah, and then in the second movie, he's the guy that got squished in... Yeah. Mm-hmm. He reprised his role as the jobber for Harrison Ford. Well, on that note...
Are you guys tired now?
Wrestlers and all, I think it's time to sign off.
Alfredo, it's your turn. I think we need to give Alfredo equal time. We're going to be quiet, and we want you to talk for an hour.
I talked for the first 20 minutes. I was already tired. Okay, fuck, man. I would say
so he tagged out to the rest of us.
Yeah, I was like,
you blew Fredo up.
He's sitting there going, when will Bixenspan Dan call? For God's sake.
That's what I tell Kurt every week. I'm like, when are they going to start calling? Where's Dr. Lucha?
Oh.
Hey, can we have Sims on sometime?
I'll start nagging him. I'm going to give him a really hard time for not having
I think he doesn't want to be on when there's like a bunch of people on it. I don't know.
He doesn't want to be on? Is that true?
It'll be a battle royal.
You know what it was? I think
we'll take turns.
No, you know what it is?
Podcast Royale.
I think it's because it's the baseball season.
Oh. Okay. Then he and I will have to debate the elegance of Lincecum Combs. My favorite player, Lincecum Combs, the greatest baseball player of all time.
Yeah. If he hears this, he'll call next time or something.
Yes. I would like to have Dr. Lucha call because, Dr. Lucha, I know you're a big baseball fan, and you must feel sorry for me because I'm a longtime Baltimore Oriole fan. So please call in, Dr. Lucha. And
I must say to everybody out there,
the Baltimore Orioles are the only team eliminated from contention by the third inning of the first game. That's usually what happens with them.
I want to remind everybody out there that despite Bougie Baker's successful attempts at blackmailing many, that the big blast boys merely feigned a naivete. They realized that contrived world that Bougie Baker built around them. They played their cards with cleverness. Oh, the director hid it from us. If he had only sped the blast-off girls, if he had only filmed this in speed color as was done to Speed Lovers, the big blast would have been the biggest thing on the big screen. Taunt, humiliate Bougie Baker in front of the TV host and the crew. Shatter those dreams, babies. Shatter those dreams. You can become Theseus if you want. You can smell Colonel Sanders' 11 herbs and spices. The herbs, they are your senses. You are the herbs. We are one. Cerebra reparme, which we always do. Lapdog Gordy. Bougie Baker. We're still flying high. I put it as simply as I could. So remember, boys and girls, if you're ever walking in Southern California on a starry night and you see something shooting across the sky, it is not a shooting star. It is a heavenly handful of...
Carlos Esparza, the most interesting man in the world.
Boy, how times change. Times, they do change. Thank you, my babies. We will see you all in 2 weeks.